Hello. This is the third part of the lesson on design build project procurement. So this part will focus on best practices, kind of a way to summarize what we learned in the first two parts of this lesson, and maybe elaborate more on a couple of additional concepts related to design build procurement. So this is the handout I give to my students. It's a summary of the design build DBIA best practices, and kind of we're trying to summarize all of the best practices and implementation techniques that are mentioned under procuring design build services aspects of the design build done right framework. And we'll not go over all of these, but we'll highlight here the important ones. So first one is limit deliverables that you request in the RFP or RFQ. So just be precise to the point. What are the things you really need to differentiate between different proposals and the different teams? You need to have a realistic project budget, especially if you have the budget as a constraint or price as a criteria. But especially if it is a constraint, because you don't want to set a budget that's too low and people will say, look at it and laugh and walk away. Or also it's not too high, so you're wasting your, especially if you're public agency, you're wasting the taxpayers' money. So just need to be realistic about the budgets you set for the projects. And when you use value-based procurement, when you select based on technical aspects, performance-based requirements is a key criteria here, will be the basis for such criteria and scoring. Of course, before you do that, probably there's a phase before it to pick the best qualified. So the shortlisting here is important, and like we learned, federal agencies typically recommend up to around three shortlisted teams. During the proposal time, it's recommended also to have confidential kind of proprietary meetings, especially you're dealing with projects that have a lot of proprietary technology. So things like food processing, like the one we have here, or water treatment plants, oil and gas, things like that. That the technology, a lot of it is patent and proprietary, and the design builders wanna propose that to you or kind of get feedback on it. These meetings should be proprietary if the law allows it. So depending on your local legislation, that would allow a public officer to meet with service providers or the design build teams in a proprietary confidential setting, which some states do not allow. If you have a public agency officer who is authorized to sign contracts, if they have a meeting, it should be documented and made available. The notes of this meeting or the meeting minutes of this meeting should be available to the public. The next here is reasonable stipends, and this is a big deal here. So those design build teams are proposing to the project. Now it's kind of a best practice recommended by DBA is to actually pay them to submit these proposals, even if they're not selected. It's recommended to pay them because DBA acknowledges the amount of effort and money and time that these teams put into providing technical proposals to the project. So to allow them to recoup this cost and also be comfortable investing their time and effort to give or to deliver design excellence and innovation, this practice here is recommended for this reason. And finally here, timely debriefing. So part of building trust, it's not building trust for only this project, but on the long term between the owner and the design builders. If they're going to do other projects in the future, the owner want to build this trust over time and have a reputation that they are a good owner that appreciates the effort that the different teams put in proposals, and they actually provide feedback on why they were not selected. So they can improve in the future and submit better proposals for other projects. So moving on to incentives. So this best practice here, it's in contracting, but still it's part. It has implications in procurement, and it's in the DBIA best practices. You will see a lot of the same thing can have implications in procurement, contracting, and execution. So there is some overlap and extension of the concept between the three kind of phases here. But incentives here is a very important one, a very important concept here in design build, and generally in construction, but in design build it has a very unique position here. So the thing about also the mentality shift, the owner's success depends on the contractor's success, or the design build team success. So that's the mentality that the owner should have when dealing with design build delivery method. And these incentives should be aligned in a way to match the project main risks. So to make the contractor motivated to take on these risks, you should align the incentives to be kind of with these risks. So risk one will have this incentive. So if the contractor does or the design builder does a good job with it, they will get this incentives. So here there are two types of incentives: cost incentives and award fees. And the idea is to strategically, in the procurement phase and contracting also, to use these incentives to, make the design build team successful and be kind of setting the road and helping them to be successful. So when you read contracts, traditional design bid build, contracts come with the mentality that they presume or assume failure, and they put the contract clauses based on that. So are we really trying to assume? Your mentality here is you want the project to succeed. So the mentality should be providing incentives to help contractors to acknowledge their success, instead of being defensive and considering the worst case and the failure, which is, contractually, this is what people, the mentality they come contractually to a project, but from design build, again, collaborative mentality, it should be more focused on success. So incentives here can be explicit or implicit. Implicit are things that you don't have to say, I'm incentivizing you by giving you this. But the way that the contract is structured, so the different contracting approaches here, cost plus fee. So that's an implicit incentive in some way, especially if you say attached to it, So it's incentive in some way. So I have to be careful here, because cost plus, there is no incentive to save cost, but it's implicit in a way. It's incentivizing the contractor not to be worried that much about cost. This is kind of the point of view you have to look at it. So it's implicit by making the contractor comfortable and exploring innovation and trying to provide value to the contractor and not be worried that much about cost. Explicit is now like you explicitly say, I will give you this incentive if you achieve a specific outcome. So it can be incentive contracts. So in the contract, it provides clear incentives like shared savings. We learn about that in GMP, guaranteed maximum price. Some aspects of GMP the owner can actually say, if any savings you will achieve below the target cost, you will share, let's say, 30% of that. Or if you save on the contingency funds, you will save on that. You will share these savings. So that's the incentives. And then there are award fees. So award fees are different than incentives because they are related to not cost, but related to performance. So performance, non-cost performance factors. So let's say the award fee is if you design a building that's platinum LEED certified, I will give you this award. But if you give it to me gold certified, I will not give you that award. So that's based on performance. So this is similar to what we covered before, but best practice here by DBIA is that you need to include explicit incentives in the design build contracts. So the design build team proposing to your project will know now, yeah, I see there are incentives, and this actually builds trust. So that's diagram here we have seen before. The trust is built through incentives, through focusing on past performance and valuing qualifications, and also considering like performance-based requirements. So we covered that before. So you're building trust by rewarding superior performance, not mediocre, lowest price kind of proposals that will be inflated later with change orders and these practices. So that's how incentives build trusts. So incentives, you need to know what to incentivize. So it's not like you're providing incentives for free. You acknowledge the effort that these incentives will require. And also risk here is kind of a measure of what to incentivize. You have to be careful about how much incentive you provide, because sometimes contractors can make a lot of profit out of such incentives, unless if you're not really having a careful thinking about how much incentives you provide. Provide clear expectations about how to get such incentives and awards, but you have to commit to that. So it's not like, oops, the contractor is getting half a million incentive. I will not pay that. You have to commit to what you promised. And another thing here is that you cannot provide too much design information here or details on how the work is performed. So you provide incentive of the outcome, not how to achieve this outcome. Another concept we want to cover here is ATCs. We mentioned it in the previous video, but in this video here, ATCs is a way to encourage design build proposers to innovate. So it's kind of similar in specs in design bid build, in descriptive specs, that always designers will say better than or equal to, or for substitutions. So if you have a product mentioned, the designer will have this kind of as a doorway to allow flexibility in substituting this product. So proposers can have this alternative of proposing other technical concepts than the ones suggested or listed in the proposal or the RFP. So the owner would say, let's say a bridge, they would say deliver a concrete bridge, but maybe the proposing team will say, let's actually consider steel bridges. So here, of course, it should be performance based, but sometimes you will provide concepts in the RFP, so you limit the amount of effort that people put into, and also it's based on maybe most of your bridges in your DOT district are all concrete, and you don't have the expertise of managing steel. So, but providing concepts in the RFP may limit the innovation, and this is why you might allow ATCs in the RFP. But the point here, it should be confidential. So if a proposing team kind of comes and say, I'm proposing ATC, you cannot share it with other proposing teams. So team A proposes ATC, team B, C, D cannot know about it. It should be confidential. And if the owner accepted, they can use it as a basis for the technical proposal of that team. So it fosters creativity, and one thing we'll learn about later is value and value engineering. So it's different than value engineering. It's too early to think about it as a value engineering. Value engineering happens in the execution part. And one thing here, observation, which is a little interesting, is that ATCs are heavily used in transportation and water and wastewater sectors. Why? Probably because these sectors are more dependent on, or kind of more friendly to depend on, performance-based qualifications, performance-based selection and requirements. So if you have performance requirements easily to identify for the project, then concepts can be easily changed. So that's kind of my hypothesis, but it would be an interesting study to actually prove that. But just a hypothesis. So we'll wrap up here with questions that the owners should ask before they proceed into the procurement for design build projects, and also how things can go wrong in design build procurement. So first of all, how did our market outreach tell us? So does the market justify the things that will lead you to considering design build as a delivery method? How many proposals will likely participate, considering the market and the demand for design builders? How will we evaluate proposals in terms of the importance of price relative to the technical aspects? Is the budget realistic? We mentioned that. And how far will we advance the RFP's design? So for the RFP, what design information will be included in the concepts, how much descriptive, so all of that, you have to be very careful about that. Site information and how much uncertainty is in that should be included or reflected in the procurement. Risk assessment, depending on the project complexity and the background and the environment around it, you should have a very detailed risk assessment. Any constraints about proprietary meetings, which is one of the best practices, to have these proprietary meetings with and shortlisting the firms and having these meetings with them. But like I mentioned, some agencies are limited by law and regulations to have such proprietary meetings. All meetings has to be open, so that best practice cannot be implemented. And who will be in the evaluation committee, and who will be the ultimate decision maker here? So the evaluation committee can be the project owner, facility manager, can be some of the users, maintenance crews that you have in your organization, facility operators. So you need to be careful about selecting who will be in this committee, because probably the committee will provide a recommendation to the decision maker, who will follow the recommendation at the end, most cases. How things can go wrong. So you fail to have key staff in your organization that are trained to deal with design build. There are issues with RFP and how it matches with the market conditions. There are issues with considering qualifications and past performance in the evaluation of the proposals. You're too much focused on price compared to performance and this value. You fail to consider part of the qualifications key personnel that are part of the design build team. You require too much technical information to submit, which you don't need to differentiate between better. So you're asking for too much details. And here it's kind of you're having an imbalance between the requested scope and budget. So you don't have a realistic budget, and contracts that you share are very cumbersome. It's not like easy to follow contracts, or very restrictive, or not rewarding to the design builder. Trade contractors are excluded. No shortlisting of proposals. So you're considering 10 proposals, which is very cumbersome and very hard to manage from both the owner side, and kind of losing the trust of those teams proposing to you. You're not establishing a performance-based kind of RFP. Again, it's the price issue and the balancing it with the technical. Not providing one-on-one confidential proprietary meetings. That's also another touch on that. Confidentiality is a big, again, confidentiality, proprietary kind of meanings will build that trust. Stipends to the teams who propose and submit proposals to your project. The consideration of the rewarding the teams who are proposing to your project, considering the risks unique to this project. And finally, is just that mental shift. We mentioned that mental shift. It is really mental shift toward the left in terms of not the left political, but the left in the timeline of the project. If you imagine the McLeamy effort curve, so you're allowing a lot of collaboration, front loading a lot of collaboration to happen between the designer and the builder. So that's the end of this video and the end of this lesson on design build procurement. We'll discuss further about this topic when we meet in class. But until then, take care of yourself and those around you. Bye.